Hey, what's up guys? It's Shamrocked here, back for Season 2. I've taken a little bit of a break since Season 1 in terms of making content. I didn't really make anything in the last half, so I apologize for that. But yeah, I'm back here. I'm going to be making videos, maybe not as frequent as I was before, but I will be making some dungeon guides as well as a general Season 2 overview, and that'll come, so just stay tuned. But yeah, I did want to upload this video. This is for a Priory of the Sacred Flame on a +15. I know this is a hard dungeon. It's probably considered one of the harder ones this season. But thankfully, Resto Shaman in our current iteration has like a really sweet kit for this dungeon. And it just, yeah, with just the fact that we can do so much CC, we have great ranged kick on a short cooldown, and we have the throughput for healing to keep up with everything. The only struggle I would say with Priory is the timer, although not tight, on the higher keys, the tank does need to like chain pull and keep going. You can't really afford to stop, so it's hard to like sneak in a drink for mana towards the end of the dungeon in the last room, just because you're not killing everything before you move on to the next pack. So I would say that is like the main struggle for this key. But other than that, if you have a tank with a decent route who can live, if you have DPS who can watch their feet, and if you have a group that can sort of call out kicks or, you know, just really help with the CC and have that coordinated, that will make this key a lot easier. Out of all the keys, I think this is probably one of the ones where you want to be in Discord if possible the most, because it really does become a lot easier if you can coordinate stops and kicks and all that. So before we get into the key, let's just take a look at the talents. I won't go into too much detail here, just because if I do a overview, like a Season 2 Resto Shaman overview guide, I will, you know, go into the talents much more in depth and explain why I'm taking what. But you can just copy this exactly. It's pretty standard. This is actually the build that I've been using for every single dungeon so far. I think I'll start tweaking some things once we get into the really high keys and I need to like sort of brainstorm on how to get through certain healing checks. But right now, this build is very cookie cutter, amazing, just like works for everything. So I guarantee if you try it out, you will be pleased with it. On the left side though, for Priory, the important things I would mention taking: Primordial Bond. You definitely want as many defensives in this key as you can. Seasoned Winds. This is a huge one. You're going to be interrupting a lot, so getting that extra DR from every interrupt is pretty big, especially on the last boss. It's really nice. You will probably want to take Earth Grab Totem. This is another tool for the last boss. If you stun the ads with Earth Grab Totem and they get the rooted for the full 8 seconds, it's really nice because they'll die before they reach you, which we'll explain when we get to that boss. And then everything else here is pretty standard. One thing you could take is Thunderous Pause if you want to sacrifice anything else. If you were going to sacrifice something, maybe Earth Grab, if somebody else in your group has a good way to handle the ads on the last boss. You could also maybe sacrifice Primordial Bond if you really wanted to. Thunderous Pause is going to help you get out of some of the snares in the dungeon, mainly the shield one on the second boss. However, in my opinion, it's really not that important. I think you can just forego this talent for this dungeon and you'll be absolutely fine. And then, like I said, I don't want to go into too much detail here. I do want to say one thing for this build. This is something that I caught on to last season, like towards the middle end for when I was playing Totemic, and it's such a powerful combo. I almost feel like I'm giving away a trade secret for anyone who doesn't already play this. But if you play Deeply Rooted Elements as well as Oversurge and Pulse Capacitor, every time you proc Deeply Rooted Elements with a Riptide, as long as you're keeping Riptide on cooldown, you basically become a god for the however many seconds, for the 6 seconds that you're Ascendance, just because you're doing so much healing with your Surging Totem, with Oversurge Talent and Pulse Capacitor. So every time you proc that, and it will proc sometimes when you don't need it to, but more often than not, it will actually proc during good times. And it just, yeah, it's a really powerful combo. So I definitely suggest using this build and trying it out if you haven't before. But yeah, with that being said, let's dive right into the dungeon. Okay, and here we go. So like I said, Priory is probably one of the harder dungeons this season. It's definitely not easy, but with the right group, with good comms, good callouts, good stops, good kicks, good use of your healing cooldowns, you will be absolutely fine. So we make a lot of mistakes in this key. The first mistake being we pull extra packs here on this first pull, which make it a lot harder just because we pulled a lot of extra footmen, which really truck the tank, but they also do their shield ability, which is just very tough to handle if you have like 20 of them, because they basically are just casting shield on cooldown, and if they're staggered too much, you maybe don't catch them all with your CC. But anyways, the things to worry about on this pull, most tanks will do this pull where they pull the mini boss and one knight and drag everything over to the right. The mini boss is going to do his thunderclap and that's just going to do big AoE damage on the entire group. And then the Knight, which you see I have focused here so I can watch for that the yell. He's going to do a Disrupting Shout, and it's just going to do big AoE damage to the entire group as well. Here you'll see it happening right now. So the Disrupting Shout is not hard to deal with, and neither is the Thunderclap. However, when both of them happen together, that's when it gets a little bit scary. So don't be afraid to pop every single cooldown you have on this pull to live, which you see I did. Once again, we did pull extra here, so I sort of panicked cooldowned, but it ended up working out. But usually, even when we don't extra pull, by the end of this pull, I've definitely used Spirit Link, usually for the first shout plus Thunderclap, and then I usually use Ascendance as well. And then sometimes if it's a nice clean pull, you'll have Healing Tide or whatever at the end for the next one, but you don't really need anything for the next couple of pulls unless you're doing it like very crazy. And you'll see, like I said, we make quite a few mistakes, especially in this first area. Thankfully it all ended up working out, so everything we pulled extra just ended up being faster in the long run because we were able to live through it, which is great. But a lot of these mistakes in a key like this, especially if we were like doing a 16, would just be lethal and your key would be bricked. So I definitely advise you to not pull extra if you can help it. The mob density in this dungeon is pretty, it's okay, it's forgiving, but there are a lot of places where you can back up and butt pull something, or if you have classes that have like really big range on some of their abilities, or you know, things like we have a rogue, so like something like Killing Spree could accidentally pull something if things are too close. So those are just things to be careful of. Moving into the second pull, really, as long as you can keep the casters under control, everything is good. And as you see here, everything is kind of spread out for us. We did not have a good way to group this until that chains, so it was hard to control the mobs, but now that we have everything good, it's easier. But you'll see we actually had a death there, which was due to double casting, which is unfortunate. You can't really do anything about that as a DPS other than having somebody interrupt or stop it. What I could have done actually, so I have the Buren trinket, which is a trinket from Darkflame Cleft that I highly advise you to get if you don't have one already. If you can get on Mythic track, that's great, but even Hero track is fine too. Buren is this massive 4 million shield that you can put on anyone, and it has a 1.5 minute cooldown, and just the way it works is it absorbs 50% of damage taken until the shield dissipates. And it's just considering shamans don't have like an external, it's really important to have something like that, especially in a season where we lost one of our cooldowns in Ancestral Guidance. So yeah, anyways, I do advise you to pick up that trinket if you can. It definitely saves a lot of lives throughout this key, including my own. Anyway, so the second mini boss does the lunge, and your tank is probably going to pull him with other packs as we're doing here. If you can find an LOS spot like this one behind the stairs, it's great. It helps make grouping everything easier. However, you can see we just made a big mistake there in that we grouped up while the lunge was coming out, and that put a big bleed on everybody. So for this mini boss, every time he does a lunge, he picks a player, and it's actually very easy to dodge. If you have Ghost Wolf, which obviously you should on your bar and whatever, you should be able to dodge every single one that targets you. All you have to do is go in Ghost Wolf when he starts casting it and just run in the opposite direction. And if he leaps at you, he'll miss. Pretty much every class with some sort of movement can do it. You'll see there, I actually tried to do it, I just wasn't quick enough. If you get hit with the bleed, it's not a big deal. It does do a lot of damage though on the higher keys, so if you need to, use a defensive. Like I said, if you have a shield trinket, astral shift, anything you need to do to live. If it's the only thing you're healing, like what I'm doing right now, it's not that big of a deal. You can probably survive it. But if you get that lunge bleed on you while there's other things happening, like casters, or if you're pulling it with a knight or something and it's shouting, or anything like that, if you're basically getting any bleed plus other ability combo in the first area of this dungeon, you should probably pop something, whether it's health pot, defensive, whatever, that you need to live. So this pull up here is not that bad. It just has a knight as well as some casters. As long as you keep the casters locked down, you'll be good. And then you'll see once again, I always put my focus frame on the knight so that I can see out of the corner of my eye when they're casting shout, like right now. And that's just gonna, notify me that if anybody's low, I need to throw a shield on them. I need to do a spirit link, a cooldown, whatever. And it just helps you keep track of when that's going off, because that's really the only thing that can kill you in this pull, and one of the only things that can kill you in the first pull as well. So after we kill this, we're going to head left, and we're going to go to the first mini boss that we're going to fight. Or sorry, not first, but third mini boss. First mini boss that's up here. This one is fairly easy for everybody except for the tank. So normally what your tank is going to do is they're going to do some combination of pulls here, maybe not this exact one, but they're going to pull all of the neophytes, which are those little like acolyte dudes, into this mini boss as well as some other trash, and they are going to get absolutely trucked. Those neophytes, just because there's so many of them, they're really going to hurt your tank. So make sure your tank has a plan. Right now with this group, we're running with a rep pally, so sack is basically our tank defensive, since, you know, Resto Shamans don't have one. So if you don't have a sack in the group, make sure your tank has a plan, and they're not just expecting you to, you know, somehow miraculously keep them alive. They either need to have a big defensive, they need to have you use Spirit Link, or like I said, if you have the Buren trinket, that is also a really nice shield you can put on them when they are scared. But other than that, this mini boss just needs to be kicked. So once again, if you're in Discord, you can call out a kick rotation, makes that a lot easier. And then every time she puts on the reflective shield, all of the DPS who are damaging her are going to take a percentage of the damage they do back on themselves. So it's advised for any DPS doing this to not do any huge big hits, just little small ones so that your healer can keep up. I have run this key with classes like a Dev Evoker, where I don't know what they use one ability on that shield, probably a really hard-hitting single target ability, and it will just chunk them down from like 30% health to nothing. So yeah, DPS, just make sure that you are being careful, and then healers, just make sure that you're watching your whole group when that's happening, just to keep an eye on everybody. Next, when we pull in these light spawns, so we have one in this pull, and you'll see them also at the end of the dungeon as well. They are very dangerous on hierarchies. They do the pulsing light, or whatever it's called. It's basically a channel that they'll pick on one person, and it does a lot of single target damage. So right now it's happening on our warrior. So any defensives that you can use if you're targeted by that, or once again, like for me, I just saved him with the shield trinket, the Buren. Anything that you can use to help them out. Another great tip for a Resto Shaman when dealing with any single target channel like that is feel free to like put Earth Shield on the target as you see it being cast. I don't actually do that here, but I probably should have. It's just going to increase the healing that you're doing on that target, and it's also going to make them take decreased damage from it as well. So it's really win-win, as long as your tank isn't in a spot where he's like needing it, which, I mean, let's be real, it's only like a 4% DR now, 3%. It's not very powerful, so your tank will normally be able to survive without it. So it's actually more important and probably more beneficial to throw it on a DPS when they're being channeled by something like that. But once again, I didn't actually do that in this key, so you don't have to. It's just a tip for if you can. Okay, so pulling this next mini boss, he just casts fireballs. All you do is interrupt them. Every so often, he's going to cast like a Cinder Blast, or yeah, Cinder Blast is right there. If you need to let a kick go off, like if you're doing a big caster pull like this, the Cinder Blast is your best candidate, because all it's going to do is put a big dot on the tank. So as long as you're in a position where you can dispel that dot right away, you are more than welcome to let that Cinder Blast cast go off and take care of more of the higher priority casts, like the pre-seals or the Holy Smites or the fireballs that are going out. But once again, that's only if you have a dispel up, because if you do leave that dot on the tank, they will kill them pretty quickly. Okay, this is the first boss. You could lust this boss. I think a lot of groups do. However, we found more value in lusting the pull after this boss, because you can pull 4 paladins with lust and handle it from a healing perspective. So that's how we do this. But once again, if you're just, you know, a group hanging out, you can definitely lust this boss. I know that this boss is a lot harder for certain tanks, like for instance, paladin tanks. It's really rough on. So they might want you to lust this boss just to get out of it quicker. But in theory, this boss is really easy. He only does a few things. So he's going to put a bleed on the tank pretty much constantly throughout the entire fight. It does very big damage. So make sure you are watching the tank and asking them if you're in Discord to let you know when they're in trouble. So you can either pop a Spirit Link or pop a Shield Trinket or something to help them live. Even just spamming healing surges into them is better than nothing if you know that they're going to be in trouble. The next thing the boss does is a throw spear. It's this big red line that comes out of him. If you're standing in it or near it, it will kill you. If you're standing right behind him, it will also kill you. It has a really strange hitbox that is not easy to discern from the line on the ground. So make sure you're standing far away from that line every single time. Like, even if you think you're safe, just move out even further just to be extra safe. The other thing he does is he does a Savage Maul, which he just jumps on a player and he mauls them until you, I think you do like 5 million damage or something like that. basically just a shield on him. So that's by itself is not that bad, but when he does it in conjunction with the AoE ability that I'll talk about next, it can be quite painful. So make sure you're watching for who gets targeted by that, and you're using whatever you can, just spamming healing surges on them, or once again, you can earth shield them, you can do whatever you need to do. So this boss will actually be different depending on which mini boss you do it with, like which mini bosses you do. I think we're at a point in the season where it's pretty standard what people do. So you're probably always going to get the same mini boss that you're seeing here. What she does is not that bad. It's just a channeled AoE on the group every so often, like every minute or so. So make sure you're ready to heal that. It's called Holy Radiance. The only thing that makes that scary is that he can do the Savage Maul during the Holy Radiance. So if somebody gets targeted by that, they have to use a defensive, or you have to spam some healing into them so they don't die. But other than that, you can just heal through it. I advise towards the beginning of the fight, feel free to use cooldowns like Healing Tide or Ascendance in order to heal through the AoE damage. But keep in mind, you definitely need to save some big cooldowns for the pull after this. So towards the end of this fight, I would say make sure you have at least 2 cooldowns going into the next pack. Preferably Spirit Link is one of them, but at least Ascendance or Healing Tide as well. If you do need to use a cooldown towards the end, that's fine. But like I said, just make sure you have at least something up going into the next pull. And this fight is pretty tough on the mana because you are spamming the tanks and the group during the AoE damage. So after this pull, make sure your tank doesn't die if they still have the dot, and then sit down for a quick drink. And try to get to full mana before you tackle this room, because this room is a lot of chaining. It's like the tank is not going to wait until every pack dies for you to stop and drink. So you want to enter this area with full mana. But we're going to pull this entire room, and we're going to Lust. So we have 4 paladins. The paladins are obviously the most dangerous part of these pulls. They're going to do Consecration, which is just yellow stuff on the ground that you need to move out of. But other than that, they're also going to do an ability called Sacred Toll, which I think is just like a play on Divine Toll that our actual pallies get. Sacred Toll is going to truck your party. It's going to do like 50% health and damage at least every single time on this key level or higher. Probably more unless you have defenses running. It actually does around 60 to 70% of your health. So just make sure that you are using cooldowns as needed. I find this dungeon is so good for healing Stream Totem just because of the chain heals that they come out, or that they blast out. So basically every time a toll happens, I am either using a cooldown or I'm just using all of my healing Stream Totems and also using Totemic Recall to get an extra one in there. So your goal, obviously, between each Sacred Toll is to get the group back up to about 90% health so the next one doesn't kill them. Other than that, like, you don't need to top everyone up. And if you get into a situation where somebody is not topped and you're about to take the Sacred Toll, hopefully they're using a defensive. But if they aren't, once again, you can throw an Earth Shield on them if you see it coming. You can use your Burin Trinket. You can use Spirit Link to save them. Just whatever you got to do. And you're going to actually see one of our DPS die here shortly, probably in like a minute or so. I used Spirit Link Totem to save them, but it like kind of lagged, so like it was just like a split second too late. But what I also could have done is I think I could have just used my Burin Shield Trinket on them, but I clearly didn't think about it. I thought Spirit Link was going to be fine. But once again, that's just to reiterate, like, make sure you're using every single tool you have in your kit. So if you're running another on-use trinket, make sure you're actually using it for this part, because it is kind of scary. Also, make sure you're using your defenses pretty liberally as well. So Astral Shift, basically anytime you think you're scared of dying, just pop that. Or if you need to focus on healing other people and not yourself, you can pop that as well so that you know that you're safe. Make sure you're using your Stone Bulwark Totem if needed. And yeah. So there he dies. So as you can see, my Spirit Link Totem was like a second too late there. But once again, my Shield Trinket is up. I could have just used that on him and it would have saved him as well. So it's just bad play on my part. But also through this area, you're going to notice I'm kind of downplaying it because it's not really something I can control in your keys, or really anything you can do unless you're a shot caller. But you really need to have your kicks and your stops sorted out for this area, or DPS will die, which is actually what happened to our DPS that died a minute ago. It's just too many casts going off at the same time while the tolls are happening. So if you get any Holy Smites or Fireballs going off during a line of 1, 2, or 3 Sacred Tolls, that person is probably going to die if they don't have some sort of defensive. So making sure you have your kicks and your stops figured out is probably the best way to make this room much easier. But what's really nice is once you get through all that hard stuff, your last pull is not that bad. And then what's also nice is there is some RP after you kill all of this trash, meaning that it kind of forces your group to stop. It allows you to take a break, take a breath, and also drink to restore all the mana that you use trying to get through this room. And you will likely need it for the next boss. So the next boss is probably the scariest boss in here, I think. I definitely think the trash throughout this whole dungeon is just harder than the bosses in general, but this boss takes a close second for being like the hardest part of the dungeon. Depending on what classes you're running though, I guess there are some classes that can cheese it. Specifically a Death Knight is really, really, really good for this fight. Paladins are also really good. Basically any class that can immune soak the sacrificial pyre that he puts out, that will just make this fight a lot easier. So just to explain the way this guy works, he has 3 abilities. He has Hammers, Sacrificial Pyre, and he has Castigator's Shield, as well as a kick. So don't forget about the kick, but that's probably the easiest mechanic. For the hammers, you want to stack up with your group, bait them all in the same spot, and then once the hammers come out, you want to run to the other side of the room so that you are far away from them. For a Sacrificial Pyre, basically what happens is every time someone runs into it, it depletes a charge. It has 3 charges when he's not empowered, and it has 5 charges when he is empowered. Every time somebody runs into it and takes a charge, it's going to do group AoE damage and put a dot on that person. Note that the dot is extremely rough. So anyone taking more than 1 stack, unless you're a tank or unless you have some sort of immunity or a big defensive, you are going to die. So make sure everybody in the group is only soaking once, unless, like I said, you have a plan for soaking multiple. If you are soaking, make sure you're using Astral Shift with it, because like I said, this dot really, really hurts. If you have a group with immunities, such as DK, I believe they can use AMS, Pallies can use their bubble, and Rogues can use Cloak, make sure that they are using those abilities on the points in the fight when you have empowered pyres, because the empowered pyres are going to be 5 charges rather than 3, and obviously 5 charges is a lot harder to deal with. So as you see, we actually just made a mistake there. We called for the Pally to use his bubble to soak those pyres, and it was only a 3 instead of a 5. So we just messed up there. But so the next time we get 5, we just have to work it out a bit. We actually have Shades of Grey is a really, really good rogue in this group. He was able to take 3 charges with a defensive and then cloak off the 3 stack debuff here, which is really great. And then the rest of them we just soak natty. Also very important for this fight is that you're not soaking right before or after the Castigator's Shield, because as you saw, that does do a lot of damage to everybody. So if you have an overlap of people soaking the Sacrificial Pyre while the shield is going out, it's probably going to kill people unless you pop like a Spirit Link or something like that. So just make sure that you're watching for that. One of the things I really like about this fight and a lot of the bosses this season, compared to last season and maybe actually a couple of seasons ago, is they're not really healing intensive. Like obviously this season we have some of the really big healer bosses like Swampface and Candle King, among a few others, but really a lot of these fights seem to be more mechanic oriented, which I think is a nice change compared to last season. Last season it felt like all of the hard bosses were either a really tough healing check or maybe like a tough damage check or something, but it didn't feel like there was a lot of mechanics to deal with. Whereas then you get a fight like this and it's just all mechanics. Like you'll see I only use Healing Tide Totem here because the healing is really not that bad. It's all about being able to handle the mechanics properly and using every class that you have to their full potential, right? So anything that has any sort of immunity should be used for this boss to help soak those pyres. But yeah, if you can do it nice and easy like that, it makes that boss not so bad. But like I said, I think we made that look a lot easier than it is. We actually had a practice key before this one on the 16, and we got pretty far. So, and we actually then had a 15 after, which we missed by 20 seconds. So this was actually like our 3rd attempt at this key. So we had really good practice on pretty much all of these sections before going into this, which really helped, obviously. After that boss, once again, you're going to want to take a second to drink here because this last room is going to be a lot of tank chaining. There's not going to be a lot of room for you to like actually sit down and drink. So you want to go into this with as much mana as possible. And on the off chance that you do kill a group before pulling the next group, which we do here, actually. I believe we do. You need to take that whatever second you have to sit down and drink and just really prep yourself for full mana, because it's very likely that you will be going from the mini boss at the end, which does a ton of AoE damage and is basically like a big mana vacuum, directly into the boss. So you won't have room to sort of re-up your mana at that point. So you sort of need to be prepared for that. All right, going into this room, most tanks will do this LOS pull where everybody sort of hides behind the door here. The main kicks you have to watch out for are the priest heals and the fireball volley from the mages. So you want to assign somebody to each of those kicks on those mobs, and then everybody else can just sort of freely kick the fireballs and the holy smites as needed. Don't forget about Cap Totem as well. Cap Totem is really nice to put down here during other AoE abilities. So for instance, the Sacred Tools that are going off, if you don't want to deal with kicks during all of that, you can just put a Cap Totem down. And you also have your Thundershock knockup that you can be using as well to really help out with that. What makes this pull tricky is you have one of the light spawns, which are going to do that big single target channel. If that channel targets somebody during a Sacred Toll or during another cast or whatever, it's going to be very difficult to deal with. So make sure you're ready for that. That's another thing where I think classes should use their kit to their full extent. Mages could use whatever their time ability is. Rogues can use Cloak. Warriors can use Spell Reflect. DKs can use AMS. There's lots of stuff that people have in their kit that they can use to handle that. But when, like I said, when in doubt, make sure you're earth shielding that target if you need to. And if you have some sort of shield or external trinket, that you are using it as needed on those people as well. So this is the spot I was talking about. Normally you don't get this second to drink. A tank will directly chain into that, but we were able to kill it quick enough. We had like one pally as a straggler that we were able to get down. And so I was able to actually drink back up to like 90% mana, which is really, really useful, like I said, for this whole room. This next pull is nothing too scary. It only becomes scary if you accidentally pull extra with it, which is what we did on the try before this, the 15 we tried. And we actually did get through it. We lived, but we had to lust, which was really unfortunate because ideally you want lust on the mini boss in this dungeon. So I believe we have a couple of deaths coming up here. I think it's just either double casts or maybe casts into Sacred Toll, which is really just goes to show you that don't give up on the key. We actually have a death going directly into the mini boss as well, which I think at the time all of us were like, oh, okay, there goes the key. But yeah, we stuck it out and we played it. So what actually saved us here is we didn't waste a battle res on this. Oh, and I died too. I was trying to go and battle res him and I sort of lost my footing and then had the channel on me and cast. So I died, but thankfully I had reincarnate. Our rep pally released and came back, and that actually left us with another battle res, which we're going to need for this mini boss. Hopefully when you do this key, you won't need it, but just saying that we got pretty lucky by saving it there. So this is another pull. This whole room is really not that bad if you can control kicks, but it's your worst nightmare if you can't, especially with the purification channel that keeps happening. Anybody who has that channel on them that's also getting targeted by a spell is most likely going to die if they don't have anything up. Something really nice that all of these Risen mobs do as well is they explode when they die. So really important as well that your group is sort of watching the cadence of the damage, and if people are low, they're not killing all of these guys right away because they do quite a bit of damage when they pop. All right, and so then we go into the mini boss. Our rep pally dies. I think he got aggro or something, which is really unfortunate. And this is something that I don't think any other class but a Resto Shaman could do. You know, considering we don't actually have a battle res, is I put Spirit Link down to save the group while I was able to battle res, which, like, you know, thank God. And thankfully we didn't hit lust right away either. We were able to save it for when we got our guy back up, and then we lusted and everything is good. I also had to pop a healing tide there as well. So normally for this mini boss, you would like to spread your healing cooldowns out. Like, I think if we had pulled this with nobody dying, I probably wouldn't have even used one cooldown yet, maybe a healing tide. I like to save Spirit Link towards the end when you really feel like you're out of options. And I like to have Ascendance somewhere in the middle too, like when we're pulling the next pack into this, which you'll see. I do believe I use Ascendance here in a second. But basically you want to throw everything you have. Like, don't leave anything in the bag at this point. Just throw every cooldown that you have because you don't really need it going into the first boss or into this boss, and all of your cooldowns will come up during the boss for when you need them. So with this mini boss, just use everything you have left in the tank to keep your group alive and get them down without spending too much mana. Because like I said, most groups will chain these mobs into the last boss, so you will not get a chance to drink before the mini boss, which really only affects like our class, I think, which is really unfortunate. But as long as you're being careful with your mana and keeping that in mind as you go into this room, you should be fine. Now, last boss. This boss is actually pretty easy. I think it's a really nice way to cap off the key. If you can make it this far with 4 to 5 minutes left, you should be fine. Like, you should time the key. There's not really anything that can wipe you on this boss, I think, other than if you don't manage the intermission ads properly. Also, something you may have noticed there is when those ads died, they didn't explode and damage us. The reason is if you can stun those ads as you kill them, if they are actively stunned, they will not explode. So you can use your cap totem, any other class that you have in your group that has any sort of long stun should be stunning those ads as they're dying if you pull them into the boss, and it will really reduce the amount of damage that you're taking in this first phase, because as you saw, when those risen ads die, they just do like a ton of damage to everyone. So the only thing hard about this boss is the inner fire overlaps. So every time she casts inner fire, it's just AoE damage that sort of pulses every couple of seconds. And then when she casts blinding light, that is a big AoE cast on the entire group. It does a big chunk of damage to everybody, and it's going to stun anybody that's looking at her, which is a callback to an ability from like Trial of the Crusader or whatever that dungeon was back in Wrath. But anyway, so if you're looking at her when she casts that, you are going to be stunned. But even if you're looking away, you're going to take a big chunk of damage. So the inner fire pulsing ticks overlapping with the blinding light is the only dangerous thing about this fight, and it is something you have to be careful of. So once again, make sure you're using your healing stream totems to get those chain heals out on the group before and after these abilities go off. Make sure you're using your downpour ability to beef up the health of your group before or after the ability goes off. Just like I said, use every tool that you have. You should be able to get through phase 1 without using too many cooldowns. I always use Healing Tide, especially because going to this fight, like I said, you usually don't have a lot of mana. So if anything you can use in the first phase to conserve mana, but without blowing all of your cooldowns so that you do have them for the last phase, that's what I advise. So if you need to use Healing Tide, sure, go for it. If you need to use Ascendance as well, I would advise holding it, but if you need to for the group to live, then absolutely go for it. But you should save Slink for this last phase for any emergencies that happen. So if you brought the root totem talent, like I said at the beginning, you can root these ads for like a good 8 seconds and they pretty much are dead by the time they get back up. If you don't kill the boss's shield quick enough, you will get a second set of ads. So once again, make sure you have either a root totem or whatever other slow and stun and CCs that your group can do. Because once these ads reach you, they will randomly target people and attack them, and their attacks kill you very quickly. So it's just something where you need to make sure you're handling that. And if you can get past that part, you pretty much have the boss killed. It's basically now just phase 1 all over again, but with a lot of cool light effects in the background, which is kind of neat. But yeah, she doesn't really do anything different in this phase. So it's really just watching the blinding light overlaps with the inner fire, moving out of these big yellow circles that she puts on the ground. And then if she targets you or somebody else with the beam, just make sure that person is running that beam out of the group. Really important while you're running the beam as well, if you do happen to get targeted, make sure, like I am right here, if it happens during the blinding light, which is what just happened, you are facing away from the boss as you're running away. But fairly simple. I actually, like I said, I think this boss is probably one of the easiest parts of the dungeon. Like you saw I went into that fight with like 30% mana and I still have lots of like enough mana left to be fine. I also have like all of my cooldowns as well. So this is not a fight that's going to kill you if you can just do the mechanics. So it's really like a nice little victory lap, I think, if you can get through the key with enough time to kill this boss. Like I said, it should be 4 to 5 minutes is what you need. And that's it. So that's Priory of the Sacred Flame. Like I said, one of the harder dungeons this season. I think probably this is top 3 hardest with Floodgate and Meadery. I think all of the other dungeons are sort of equal, maybe with Dark Flame being a little bit easier than everything else. But yeah, overall, I'm enjoying this season so far. I think the dungeons are very well balanced. There's nothing awful like a Grimbatol or like so much harder than everything else, like Throne of the Tides or whatever. Everything seems to be slightly balanced with, like I said, Priory, Metery, and Floodgate maybe a little bit harder than all the rest. But yeah, as you saw, easy, doable. Well, maybe not so easy, but if you're running with a decent group and you guys are communicating and calling kicks and calling stops, and if you are confident in your healing as a Resto Shaman, like I said, if you're not, try out the build that I showed at the beginning and maybe that'll help you out. But we are more than capable of healing this and other hard keys. So although I know the community perception has been a little bit down on Resto Shaman this season, don't fret though. I promise we're actually really good. You just need to learn how to play to your strengths and yeah, get the invites. But anyways, thanks for watching. GG's, and I will see you in the next video.